All right, so I'm going to be going over the key to the first half or the first couple of days to the EMS Notes Part 2. Again, if you are not in a class period that I am in, you might have a different looking document, but all of the questions are the same pretty much. So the first thing that we did is we looked at the moon phases brain pop. And I'm just going to go over the most important notes from that brain pop. So you should have noted, or you should have at least seen in the video, that the moon orbits around the Earth at a 5-degree angle. So it is 5 degrees different from our orbit around the sun, which is why we don't get a solar eclipse each month or a lunar eclipse each month, to be completely honest. And half of the moon's surface is always lit by the sun and half is always in the dark. But we don't see a full half of the lit side because the amount of that bright side that we see changes as the moon is moving through its orbit around the Earth. And then there's some different phases that we learned about. The first one is our new moon. That's when the moon is directly between the Earth and the sun, so we see nothing at all, or we might just see a dark disk. Next, we have our crescent moons, and those are phases where you can see less than half of the bright side. Then we move into our first quarter moon, where it has completed 1/4 of its orbit around Earth, and we see half of the bright side. Then we have our gibbous moon, where we see more than half of the lit side of the moon. And then our full moon, and this is where the moon and the sun are on opposite sides of the Earth. We can see the entire bright side of the moon. After our full moon, we go back into our third quarter moon, which is where the opposite half of the moon is lit up from our first quarter moon. And at this point, the lit side of our moon is shrinking. Our lunar month is the amount of time it takes to get from one moon to the next new moon, and that's about 29.5 days, 29.5 days. Down, these are notes based on the brain pop quiz. I'm not going to go over these, but you can feel free to pause and kind of take a look at them if you'd like. Moving down, we talked about what causes the phases of the moon. So those moon phases are caused by the moon's orbit around Earth. So as the moon is changing position in relation to us, we're able to see different amounts of the lit up half or illuminated half of the moon. All right. And the moon is doing two things during its phases. It's either waxing or it's waning. And you learned about this in these nearpods that you were supposed to watch. So when the moon is waxing, this occurs between the new moon and the full moon. And it's when the lit side of the moon is growing and it is on the right side. So the right side of the moon is lit up and the moon appears to be growing each night. Waning is after the full moon and before the new moon. So it's that time in between the full moon and the new moon. And now the lit side of the moon is on the left and it appears to be getting smaller. Just a reminder that half of the moon is always lit. So whether it's waxing or waning, half of the moon is always lit, but we're not seeing that full lit half. That depends on where the moon is in its orbit around Earth. All right. So you should have watched the video and listened to the reading about the moon's movements. And one thing you should have noticed is that whether we're talking about rotation or revolution, the moon is moving counterclockwise. So the moon rotates in a counterclockwise direction and it revolves in a counterclockwise direction. Similarly, they both take the same amount of time. So it takes the moon about 27 days to rotate around its axis, but it also takes it around 27 days to revolve around the Earth. And this is actually why we always see the same side of the moon. So because the rotation and revolution are the same amount of time, this always keeps the same side of the moon facing Earth. And what we talked about at the beginning of this video, just as a reminder, the lunar cycle, or the time from new moon to new moon, is 29.5 days. All right. You should have watched this video or checked out these simulations. I highly recommend the simulations. They do a really good job of showing you the different phases of the moon. But this is what your diagram should have looked like. So we start with our new moon, and our new moon is completely dark. We don't see any part of the lit side of the moon. But as we go through the cycle of the moon, we move into our waxing crescent. When we hear the word waxing, we should automatically think, okay, the right side is going to be lit up here. And that's true for that entire top 3 moon images. Waxing crescent, first quarter, and waxing gibbous, the lit side is always on the right. For our crescent moon, less than half of our moon is lit up. First quarter, we have half of our moon lit up, still on the right side. And for our waxing gibbous, more than half of the moon is lit up. All right, so whenever we're waxing, we know that the lit side of the moon is going to be on the right side. Then we get our full moon. From that point on, the moon is going to start to look like it is shrinking. So whereas we went from new to full, we went crescent first quarter gibbous. Now that we look like we're shrinking, it's going to go gibbous third quarter crescent. And in this case, because it's waning, we're going to see the lit side of the moon on the left side. So notice that our waning gibbous is lit on the left side and more than half is lit. Our third quarter moon is also lit on the left side. And our waning crescent is also lit on the left side, but now less than half of the moon is lit. Then we go back to a new moon and our cycle starts again.